Hello everyone, this is Six Path Weeb. Welcome back to another deep dive into the Naruto universe. Today, we're exploring what if Naruko and Obito led the revolution? Part 3. In this part, we'll push the story further, questioning how their leadership could reshape the entire shinobi world. Disclaimer, the content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. When Obito woke up that morning, he felt surprisingly refreshed. As the memories of the previous day came back to him, a gentle smile found its way onto his face. It was a comforting feeling, realizing that Minato truly cared for him and had supported him through his emotional moment. Getting out of bed, which Minato had kindly tucked him into after he had fallen asleep, Obito planned to greet the blonde and perhaps also see Kushina and his teammates. However, before he could take more than a few steps, his door opened rather abruptly, revealing Minato himself. To most people, Minato would have appeared perfectly calm. Yet, to Obito, the subtle signs of irritation were impossible to miss: the faint twitch near his left eye, the gentle tapping of his finger against his leg, and the composed yet unmistakable tension in his posture. "Obito, we need to attend a meeting," Minato said evenly, extending a hand. Obito raised an eyebrow but followed without question. Moments later, he found himself standing in the council chamber, surrounded by serious expressions and watchful eyes. Now, everything made sense. He and Minato stood in the center of the wide room, encircled by people seated at varying heights, looking down at them. A modest wooden table and a single chair stood nearby, which Obito promptly occupied. The setup was clearly designed to feel formal and perhaps a little intimidating. The structure placed the speaker in the center, under the full attention of everyone present. Minato stepped slightly in front of Obito, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of protection. His calm composure did little to hide the growing frustration beneath the surface. Obito could tell by the way the council members glanced nervously at Minato that the Hokage's presence carried immense weight. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, began in a voice that was both authoritative and weary. "Uchiha Obito," he said, "do you understand why you've been called here today?" Obito's sharp eyes scanned the room. Many of those present were civilians rather than shinobi, and among them, he even recognized a familiar elderly man who had once lived in the same building as him. The pattern became clear immediately. He gave a polite nod. "I assume this is about the incident last week involving the apartment complex where I lived," he said calmly. The disapproving murmurs from the civilians made it evident that he was correct. "That is accurate," Hiruzen replied. "Do you have any information that could?" Before the Hokage could finish, a middle-aged man stood up abruptly. "It's obvious it was him. There's no one else in that building who could use jutsu. I demand accountability for his reckless behavior." The Hokage exhaled quietly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Nearby, Nara Shikaku exchanged a sympathetic glance with him, their shared expression silently reading, "troublesome." Obito decided it would be best to settle the matter quickly. Drawing a steady breath, he spoke clearly. "Yes, I was responsible for the fire," he said, his tone neither defensive nor fearful. Gasps echoed across the room, mostly from the civilians. The shinobi, trained in restraint, simply observed. A woman stood and pointed toward him. "See? He even admits it. We all deserve compensation for what happened." Another voice joined in. "I lost my savings that day," an elderly man exclaimed. A young woman held a wrapped parcel close to her chest. "Some of our family treasures were damaged. That building held memories we can never replace." One of the men stood up again, eyes filled not with hatred but with frustration. "Someone needs to take responsibility." Obito remained silent, his expression calm. He understood their disappointment, and although the situation was far from pleasant, he knew that facing it was the right thing to do. Through it all, Minato stood firm beside him, offering quiet reassurance. Overall, Obito couldn't help but find the entire situation somewhat theatrical. It truly felt like a dramatic play, given how emotional everyone was becoming. The arguing and shouting carried on for several minutes before the Hokage finally raised his voice, putting an end to the uproar. "Enough," he declared, his tone firm and commanding, instantly quieting the crowd. Everyone turned their attention toward him, sensing the authority in his words. "Your concerns are understandable," the Hokage began evenly. "However, although Obito is a shinobi, he is still a child. It would be unreasonable to expect him to afford a new residence or offer financial restitution for his actions." A man from the crowd spoke up, frustration lacing his words. "Well, someone needs to make things right," Whether it's him or the village, I don't care. I just want to be compensated. Another villager turned toward the speaker, frowning. What are you saying? It's his responsibility. He should be held accountable for what he's done, not the village, which is already struggling. Are you not listening? A woman interjected. The Hokage just said he can't afford that. Even if he worked for years, he wouldn't be able to pay off everything. Before the argument could escalate further, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The tension grew thick, and even Obito found it difficult to breathe under the sheer intensity of the moment. I will personally cover any compensation required, said Minato calmly, yet his tone carried a strength that commanded respect. Uchiha Obito is under my supervision and protection. Therefore, his responsibilities are mine as well. My salary will be sufficient to resolve the damages and address any financial concerns. He turned to the Hokage, who regarded him thoughtfully before exhaling a quiet sigh. That would be acceptable, assuming our civilian representative agrees. I object. Came a sharp voice from across the room. The same man from earlier stood, looking indignant. There should still be some form of consequence. That child needs to learn accountability. What if this happens again? Several villagers murmured in agreement, and Minato's shoulders dropped slightly with a weary sigh. Obito is my responsibility, Minato said firmly. I will personally ensure that no further incidents occur. You have my word that this situation will not be repeated. But he still caused the problem. Another civilian protested. There must be some form of discipline or structured guidance, something to help him improve his behavior. The discussion came to an abrupt halt as Minato placed his hands on the table with a decisive motion. His expression was calm, yet his eyes held a steely determination that silenced the room. I will say this once more, Minato stated clearly. I will take full responsibility and cover all costs on behalf of Uchiha Obito. He is my student, and I have given my word to guide and protect him. I will manage whatever consequences come of this matter. Minato offered a polite smile toward the civilian representative, though his eyes remained unwavering. Is that understood? The room fell silent, and after a long moment, a quiet voice replied, yes. With that, the matter was settled. The Hokage leaned back with a faint, knowing smile, while a nearby Nara clan member watched the scene unfold with quiet amusement. It had been quite an eventful start to Obito's morning, to say the least. The amusing part, however, was that Minato had almost immediately returned to his usual cheerful self and promptly guided Obito out of the room, seemingly unaware of the curious glances that followed them. The two wandered through the streets, visiting one shop after another, acting as though nothing unusual had just occurred. Perhaps Minato had maintained control of the entire situation after all. It certainly appeared that way towards the end. Obito wouldn't put it past him. Minato had already demonstrated his remarkable ability to handle matters skillfully, whether through his calm words, confident presence, or his well-timed decisions. They strolled through nearly every store in the district, and for some reason, Minato kept seeking Obito's opinion on various items, books, clothing, practical tools, even simple household goods. It almost felt as if Minato was buying everything for Obito rather than for himself. Most of the items were useful for daily life, so perhaps this was Minato's way of making up for the previous day when Obito had declined an invitation. Still, Obito couldn't help but feel that Minato's sudden enthusiasm for shopping was a distraction, an attempt to keep him occupied and away from certain people. Specifically, the other two members of Team 7. Obito sighed softly. He was genuinely concerned for them. Even though they were certified Chunin of the Hidden Leaf Village, they were still 13-year-olds who had just witnessed their teammate and friend, Naruko, make a deeply emotional and reckless choice. Obito was accustomed to dealing with serious situations, but when children were involved, especially those he cared about, he found himself uncertain of how to help. He was sure that his friends were worried about him, too, and he sincerely wished to see how they were doing after their last difficult encounter. When they entered the 10th shop, and Obito was now juggling 8 large bags filled with smaller ones, he finally decided to ask what had been weighing on his mind. Minato-sensei? He began. The blonde turned from examining a set of specially crafted kunai and looked at him with mild curiosity. Yes, Obito? Why are we avoiding Kakashi and Rin? Minato hesitated, his smile faltering just a little. Obito immediately felt a twinge of guilt. He suspected that Minato was keeping him away from them because of what had happened earlier. He had likely frightened them, and they didn't yet understand his reasons. He could only hope their friendship hadn't been damaged beyond repair. We'll be seeing them later today, Minato finally replied, chuckling lightly, though his tone was a bit uncertain. Just give them a little time, they'll be fine, I'm sure. Obito nodded absently, not fully processing Minato's words before the man once again cheerfully guided him to the next store. Obito sighed but couldn't help smiling faintly at Minato's persistence. By the time they returned to Minato's apartment, Obito expected nothing more than to help organize the day's purchases and then quietly retreat to his room to think. However, what awaited him inside was something entirely unexpected. As soon as he stepped through the door, bright colors burst into his view. "Happy 13th birthday!" came several cheerful voices, followed by laughter. Confetti fluttered through the air as paper streamers cascaded down, and Obito blinked in surprise at the sight before him. "Huh? What's happening?" he asked, puzzled. He hadn't even realized what day it was. After all, he'd only recently returned and hadn't had a moment to check the calendar. Kakashi sighed with mock exasperation. "You know, most people figure it out when someone says happy birthday," he said dryly, though a small smile tugged at his lips. Obito barely heard him. His thoughts drifted to the past, trying to recall when their mission to Kenabai Bridge had originally taken place. Was it later in the year? Had the conflict even begun yet? His memories were too hazy to be certain, and that uncertainty only made him more determined to piece everything together carefully this time. "Obito?" a gentle voice called. He looked up to see a pair of warm violet eyes gazing at him with concern. It was Kushina. A mix of emotions stirred within him, relief, nostalgia, and a hint of guilt. She had always been kind to him, and though their bond wasn't the strongest compared to his team, she was still someone he deeply respected and cared for. And now, seeing her smile at him again, Obito silently vowed to do better, to protect those he cared about and to make the future brighter for Naruko and everyone he cherished. Obito had always carried the weight of responsibility for what had happened to those he cared about most, Minato, Kushina, and Naruko. In another life, they could have been a true family, bound by love and shared dreams. Yet circumstances had stolen that chance from them. Sometimes Obito wondered who was truly at fault. His memories of the past were few, yet those he had replayed over and over, trying to find meaning in them. He often drifted into thoughts of what had been and what could still change if given the chance. Across the room, Kushina turned toward him with a soft sigh. "I think we've overwhelmed him, Dada Bane." Obito tried to smile, forcing a light-hearted tone. "I'm fine, Kushina Nizen." When she raised a skeptical eyebrow, he gestured to the collection of shopping bags in his hands and chuckled. "Honestly, I think Minato-sensei just dragged me through every shop in the village." The blonde immediately protested, "Wait, no. That wasn't shopping, that was for yo." "A shopping trip," Obito and Kushina said together in perfect unison, pretending to ponder something very serious. Rin giggled quietly nearby while Kakashi released a tired sigh. "Anyway," Kushina said cheerfully, lifting the bags from Obito's arms with surprising ease, "let's stop teasing him and focus on what's important. Today is your day, Obito. Let's have some cake." Obito relaxed as laughter filled the room. Surrounded by friends who cared for him, the tension in his chest began to ease. It felt strange but wonderful to experience this warmth again, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel for a long time. For years, he had buried these precious memories beneath frustration and regret, forgetting the comfort that came from being part of this small, makeshift family. He caught himself drifting again. His eyes moved around the table, noticing the concerned glances directed his way. He offered a half smile, silently saying, "I'm fine, just thinking." He made a note to himself that getting lost in thought in front of others wasn't always the best idea. "You must be tired," Kushina said kindly, breaking the brief silence with her usual bright energy. Her tone immediately lifted the mood, and Obito couldn't help but laugh along with everyone else. He was grateful that she was here, alive, and just as full of warmth as he remembered. Once the laughter faded, they finally enjoyed the cake Kushina had baked with her trademark care and enthusiasm. Obito thought that might be the end of the celebration, but to his surprise, Minato revealed that their earlier shopping trip had actually been for gifts. The thought made Obito smile, realizing just how much effort his friends had gone through to make him feel appreciated. His gaze drifted toward Rin and Kakashi. Though they appeared composed, Obito could still sense the quiet concern in their eyes. Even so, he was thankful, they were all here, safe, together. Despite the unanswered questions that lingered in his heart, and despite the regrets that sometimes clouded his thoughts, Obito allowed himself to truly enjoy this simple, heartfelt celebration. It wasn't lavish or grand, but it was filled with genuine affection. For the first time in what felt like ages, he experienced a sense of happiness that wasn't overshadowed by guilt or sorrow. Maybe, just for now, it was all right to feel this way. Maybe it was all right to smile with his friends and believe, if only for a moment, that everything was truly okay. And deep down, he hoped that was enough. After the peaceful gathering, Kakashi and Rin had quietly pulled Obito aside. Naruko noticed the knowing glances that Minato and Kushina exchanged before they left the room, and she realized that Obito would soon have to explain everything to his teammates, whether he was ready or not. As the group made their way toward the training grounds under the calm night sky, Obito's nerves grew. Kakashi had insisted they talk there, away from distractions. Obito, who carried the knowledge of future events, didn't need foresight to guess where this conversation was heading. The Kakashi standing before him was younger, less experienced, yet still carried the same determination Obito remembered. It was both familiar and strange. When they reached the open field, silence fell between them. The grass swayed gently in the cool breeze, and the two boys stared at each other for what felt like hours. Despite their differences, Obito could not deny that this was indeed Hatake Kakashi, his old rival and teammate. If they were to spar, Obito decided he would give his best effort without holding too much back. He would rely only on taijutsu, adjusting to the limits of his younger body. He had no intention of truly hurting Kakashi, only of understanding him again. "What's going on, Obito?" Rin's voice finally broke the tension. Her tone was soft but full of concern. "Please, tell us what happened." Kakashi's expression tightened, his eyes sharp as he watched Obito carefully. The weight of both their gazes pressed on him, and Obito scratched the back of his head with a nervous laugh. "Don't worry, really. I'm fine now," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. Silence lingered again. Kakashi finally turned to Rin. "Rin, could you wait near the trees? It might get a little intense." She hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded, stepping back with a worried sigh. When she had moved to a safe distance, Kakashi faced Obito again, his voice steady. "That didn't sound honest, Obito. What's really going on?" Obito raised his hands gently, hoping to calm his friend. "I'm telling you, Kakashi, I'm all right." Before he could finish, Kakashi quickly closed the distance and launched forward, not in anger, but in a determined attempt to draw out the truth through action. Obito barely reacted, instead choosing to defend lightly. He realized that this was more of an emotional release than a serious spar. Kakashi was trying to understand, not to harm. Once Kakashi's energy faded, both stood quietly, breathing heavily. Obito wiped his face and gave a small, wry smile. "Feel better?" he asked softly. Kakashi simply nodded, taking a step back and raising his hands into a stance. Obito mirrored him, a small grin forming. Despite everything, it felt familiar, like old times. Time seemed to slow as they moved. Obito dodged, countered, and flowed with Kakashi's rhythm. Their sparring was clean and precise, each testing the other's resolve without true hostility. For Obito, it stirred memories of the days when teamwork meant everything, and when dreams still felt within reach. Their match gradually turned playful, less of a contest and more of an exchange between friends rediscovering trust. When at last they both collapsed onto the grass, tired but smiling, the stars twinkled above them like silent witnesses. Obito stared at the night sky, breathing deeply. In that moment, he understood something important. He had spent so long trapped by his past mistakes that he had forgotten how to simply live in the present. Maybe rebuilding himself didn't mean erasing who he was, it meant accepting every part of his journey and learning from it. Naruko had once given him hope. Minato had given him guidance. Now, Obito realized it was his turn to rebuild, not out of regret, but out of love for the people who believed in him. He would take every part of himself, the child he once was, the man he became, and everything in between, and create something new. Someone who could protect his friends and support his family. As his eyes began to close, he faintly heard the gentle voices of Minato and Kushina calling out to him, full of warmth and reassurance. A soft glow of chakra surrounded him, easing away the pain and exhaustion. And with a peaceful smile, Obito drifted into a calm, healing rest. "What a handful," Kushina murmured under her breath, clearly anxious yet trying to keep her composure. "Your students can really test your patience, Minato." Minato only smiled softly as he looked over at the three unconscious young ninjas resting comfortably on the couch, a large blanket, courtesy of Kushina, covering them. Rin, Kushina, and Minato had brought the two boys and Naruko home after they had collapsed from an intense training session. Rin had immediately tended to their injuries with great care before eventually falling asleep herself, exhausted from her efforts. Kushina, though she pretended to be annoyed, had reluctantly given up her favorite blanket, though deep down, she was simply relieved they were safe. Minato lingered for a moment, watching the peaceful scene before quietly exiting the room, Kushina following behind him. Anyway, Kushina began as soon as they reached the dining room, her tone sharpening. What's this I heard about the council being upset with Obito? Minato sighed softly, gesturing for Kushina to take a seat across from him. It's true, he admitted calmly. Obito was responsible for accidentally setting fire to that old building, and he confessed during the hearing. Naturally, the council wasn't pleased. Kushina's eyes narrowed. And what did they do? They better not have treated him unfairly. Minato rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. They insisted he compensate for the damages and face some form of community service, he explained. Seeing Kushina's temper rise, he quickly added, but don't worry, it's been settled peacefully. Obito was forgiven, and the council agreed not to pursue the matter further. Kushina exhaled and folded her arms, shaking her head. Honestly. On his birthday of all days? Sometimes people forget that everyone makes mistakes. There's been a lot lately that's hard to believe, Minato admitted quietly, a thoughtful look crossing his face. So much has happened at once. Kushina glanced at him curiously. Did the Uchiha clan help with the expenses? She asked. Minato winced slightly before answering, not exactly. And actually, I may need to handle the costs myself this month. For a moment, Kushina studied his face carefully. Then, to his relief, she smiled. Good. I was hoping you'd say that, she replied playfully. Otherwise, I might have given you a firm lecture. Stretching her arms, Kushina walked over to the window that looked out toward the Uchiha compound. Still, she muttered thoughtfully, some people over there could use a reminder about teamwork and kindness. Minato quickly stepped closer, raising his hands in a gentle attempt to calm her. Now, Kushina, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure they'll come around, it just takes time. Kushina paused, her gaze drifting out the window. She murmured, her voice softening, the moon looks beautiful tonight, doesn't it? Minato blinked, slightly caught off guard by her sudden change in tone. Then, following her gaze, he smiled. The night sky was clear, stars shimmering faintly around the brilliant moon that glowed like a lantern in the dark. It really does, he agreed quietly. Not a single cloud in sight. Kushina rubbed her eyes gently. It's so bright, she whispered. Almost like a little sun in the sky. Minato tilted his head, studying the moon's radiant light as it spilled softly across the landscape. A thoughtful expression crossed his face as a realization began to form. Bright night, he murmured under his breath, eyes widening slightly as the thought crystallized. Kaguya. Dear YouTube family. That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching and found it worth your time. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you for being part of this journey. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.